Hello, this is Kieran Regan, and we are 10 by 10 by 10, a podcast where we interview individuals about local history. Each conversation is centered around a specific topic that we will discuss. In this case, it is Lawrence. The only rule is it must start off with a fact. Today, I have two guests with me here. If you could introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Katie Arpin.
And I'm Amber Rumble.
And what would you say your relationship with Lawrence currently is?
I never really went to Lawrence when I was in high school or anything, but as soon as college rolled around, I got super acquainted with the city.
Yeah, so you're like a college student.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say I'm from here. I kind of grew up in the area, went to preschool here.
Nice. Well, you guys want to hear the fact?
Yeah.
Give me the
Okay,
deets, brah.
so this fact is specifically about the Wakarusa War. The Wakarusa War took place from November 21st to December 8th, 1855. This sparked when a Free Stater, Charles Dow, was killed by a pro-slavery advocate, Franklin Coleman. The incident moved Lawrence individuals to create a Free Stater posse to rise up inside Lawrence to protect other Free Staters.
The posse.
Missouri, however, seeing this as a threat, which Missouri at this time, I will clarify, was a pro-slavery state,
Bushwhackers?
raised 2,000 troops under the banner of law enforcement to not enforce the law, but eradicate Lawrence entirely. This almost started the Civil War until a peace treaty was signed forcefully. What do you think modern citizens of Lawrence can learn from incidents like this?
I mean, that should probably be something that I think, if you're native from Kansas, you should probably know about, bloody Kansas and how we kind of started the Civil War.
Yeah, a political town.
Yeah.
Do you know where the term Jayhawker came from?
It's like invading Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Partially.
I can't remember if Missouri burned Lawrence or we burned Missouri. It was one of those things.
Missouri burned Lawrence.
Yeah.
Because that's what's up with the Eldridge and why it's so haunted.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
it's really fascinating
yeah,
stuff
and
actually.
That first fact about the protecting Free Stater stuff, that ties in a lot with Lawrence stuff, because a lot of the bushwhackers Missouri people were coming over and just slaughtering at people living in Kansas.
Yeah.
Because they wanted it to they were trying to scare off anybody who was anti-slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Which sucks.
Yeah.
It's all about the votes, I guess.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the Jayhawker.
Yeah.
So, Free State fighters employed the nickname Jayhawkers or Redlegs around the late 1850s. It caught on as the start of the Civil War as the guerrilla fighters would fight the pro-slavery Missourians at the time and has stuck around since then. What do you think of the lineage the name Jayhawk comes from?
I think it's sick as hell.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's sort of fun to be called a Jayhawk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you stand for a little bit more than what you would think. You're not just a silly, wildcat or anything.
Yeah.
It's a mascot that, has, I think, quite a bit more behind it than, a lot of just, college mascots do. This is one that's literally, bathed in blood.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming in today.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate your thoughts and ideas, and I hope you learned a little bit more about Lawrence. We'd like to thank Amber and Katie for coming on and sharing their thoughts and opinions. We have two new guests here today, Aiden and Gabriella. If you two could introduce yourselves and also what is your current relationship with Lawrence / past history.
I'm Aiden Lewis.
I'm Gabriella Johnson, and I've only lived in Lawrence for 4 years for college.
What are your guys' thoughts and ideas of Lawrence currently?
I actually really love Lawrence. I think it's a gem of a town, almost like if Austin, Texas was shrunken down.
There's a lot of interesting things that are just sort of around that you can go and explore and find.
Speaking of interesting things, Lawrence has an incredibly interesting history, especially when it comes to the Civil War era. You guys want to hear a couple of facts?
Yes.
Okay. There was this Massachusetts-based, almost like a company, but more of a foundry, a collective, a group of people called the New England Immigrant Aid Company. It was looking to establish a anti-slavery town. Looking at Lawrence now, do you think the impact has lasted? Especially in regards to the Midwest. You see Lawrence as this blue dot in a sea of red.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
I think it shows in that, like, compared to, like, the rest of the area around here, Lawrence is actually pretty diverse as well. Like, the college, where people come from all over the place, and everyone is, treated the same, and I think that's really cool that you can still sort of see that effect all this time later.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. That was one of the first things I noticed in Lawrence, is how everyone was just nice to you no matter what. And at first I thought it was just because I was a college kid, and then as I started spending summers here, not going back home, I noticed how Lawrence really is still very diversified and very eccentric and very just welcoming. And Kansas City is actually kind of interesting with how much of a melting pot it is, and I'm glad to see that it carries over into Lawrence.
And one of the sort of talking points was around the sacking of Lawrence. Essentially, Lawrence was sacked a couple of times by Missourians who crossed the state border. They wanted to quell freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways they did that was by burning down the Free State Hotel on May 21st, 1856. The hotel was even burned down a second time, and it was a central point in the Lawrence Massacre. Do you guys know what the Lawrence Massacre is?
No.
I have, like, a vague idea. I know it was the Missourians who came over and they were like, get them. That's basically the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's sort of right. Missouri troops came over to Lawrence and killed around 400 people that were anti-slavery. This helped start the Civil War, and why Bloody Kansas became a term used in later generations. The Eldridge Hotel has since become an almost historical landmark of Lawrence. With its unique history. Do you think the historical significance of this hotel is understood in modern Lawrence?
To be honest, no, because I only knew the Eldridge Hotel for their $5 martini nights. And like, I've gone there. That's where I go on Thursday nights, if anyone wanted to know. But they never even mention it. They just talk about how they recently renovated it, and it's now like this all-American bar, and they've, I think, tried to move away from the massacre idea, but that's also, I think, because I've known that the Eldridge Hotel was supposedly haunted. So I wonder if that's kind of just they're trying not to mention it because they're trying to, like, quell that. So I wonder if it's just a PR stunt, but...
Maybe.
Yeah.
I know I've seen the hotel, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's a cool place, but I didn't know that it was, I knew it because it has like a little plaque where it's like, this is one of the original buildings in Lawrence, and it's like, oh, that's cool, but I had no idea that it was burned down twice in the massacre and stuff like that. I had no idea.
Does the reconstruction of the hotel say anything about Lawrence's resolve? Because the hotel was burned down not once but twice, and then reconstructed an additional 2 times, once in 1866 and the second one in 1929, respectively.
An American pastime is rebuilding historical places that have been destroyed. like the White House got, burned down, and we just built it again. And like that's sort of how we work. Is like, it's like something gets destroyed, and we're like, no, just to prove like you destroying it didn't even matter, so we just built it again.
Yeah.
And that's. I think that does say a lot about the resolve of the people of Lawrence. Is they're just like, yeah, you burned it down, so what? Here it is again. Guess what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
I can't say anything better.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Well, thank you both for coming on today.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated your thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank Aiden and Gabriella for coming on. We have a new guest now. Dominique, if you could introduce yourself as well as your relationship with Lawrence and maybe the greater Kansas area.
Yes. My name is Dominique Waller. Right now I do live in Lawrence as a college student, but naturally I'm from the greater Kansas City area, Shawnee to be exact, which is about like 40-minute, less than, maybe like a 30-minute drive from downtown KC.
Depends on traffic.
Yeah, which traffic is always terrible in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think the surrounding sort of like we talked about earlier with Gabriella and Aiden, about a sea of red surrounding
Ooh.
a dot of blue.
Definitely. I actually had a class, I believe it was an environmental studies class that we talked about gerrymandering in.
Yeah.
And Lawrence is basically divided in half for our seats for our Senate.
Yeah.
And it makes it so that that the Democratic population, or the more liberal and progressive population, is not adequately represented.
Yeah, there's a guy that actually came out with a typeface based on gerrymandered counties within different states.
Wild.
Yeah, so like you can see the letter A and the letter B because of how it's divided.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But speaking to like a broader sense, Lawrence has always been divided,
Oh, yes.
especially historically.
Absolutely.
You'd think people would want to change or get better.
Mm-hmm.
In our mindset, get
Yeah.
better.
Mm-hmm. As we've seen with anything, and even you can see in small, minute changes, change is a scary thing. A child having to move from one school to another, leaving their friends behind, that's a scary thought. Having your entire ideal that you've grown up with changed is a scary thought. Having an encroachment of, as some people see it, of people from a different place or a different race coming into your neighborhood is a scary thought, because it's an idea that something that's yours is not going to be solely yours anymore.
Do you think it's this idea of an unwillingness to change?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And how do you think that's reflected within Lawrence today?
There is a movement, specifically with more progressive leaders. Again, speaking back to last presidential election, Bernie Sanders came into town. A lot of people are extremely happy. There's a big progressive movement, especially now, even on KU campus, with some of the faculty actually leading a petition to remove Chick-fil-A because of their anti-LGBTQ rhetoric.
Well, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, no
it's
problem.
Very,
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was very fun to hear your ideas about, how ancient, I guess, historical political views could affect a modern day society.
Yeah.